Hi, and welcome to episode 19 of Trojan Poetry. Today we're going to read a poem called The Tea and Sage Poem by Fady Joudah. This is one that I picked, and we're going to launch right into it. Here we go. At a desk made of glass, in a glass-walled room with red airport carpet, an officer asked my father for fingerprints, and my father refused. So another offered him tea, and he sipped it. The teacup template for fingerprints. My father says it was just hot water with a bag. My father says in his country, because the earth knows the scent of history, it gave the people sage. I like my tea with sage from my mother's garden. Next to the snapdragons she calls fishmouths, coming out for air. A remedy for stomach pains she keeps in the kitchen where she always sings. First she is Hagar, boiling water where tea is loosened. Then she drops in it a pinch of sage and lets it sit a while. She tells a story. The groom arrives late to his wedding wearing only one shoe. The bride asks him about the shoe. He tells her he lost it while jumping over a house wall, breaking away from soldiers. She asks, tea with sage or tea with mint? With sage, he says. Sweet scent, bitter tongue. She makes it, he drinks. All right, so I read this poem the first time through, and like with most poems, I had to reread it. I don't know, and to be honest with you, I don't know why it stood out to me. I was thinking of one to pick for today's episode. I think what stood out to me were the first and last scenes. The one of them in the airport, and you read the name of this the title of the poem, it seems so innocuous, but then it launches into this interrogation scene, basically, where the father gets tricked into giving up his fingerprints on this teacup. And so I think that there's a link there between the father and the fingerprints on the teacup, and then he launches into this section about the mother and her kind of, home life, and then at the very end she tells this strange story that seems like a non sequitur, just comes out of nowhere, the guy with one shoe. And the last two lines also stood out to me. Sweet scent, bitter tongue, she makes it, he drinks. So this guy has just escaped from these soldiers. In this story, he runs in to talk to his bride, and she doesn't ask him any questions. She just hands him a cup of tea, and that's it. There's like no conversation. I just thought that was really bizarre. Like this guy is trying to escape from soldiers. He's got one shoe on, comes running in, and she's just like, "Here, have a sip of tea," And obviously that must be important. So I'm looking to John for some help here on this one, because a couple other things that stood out to me. I thought the first stanza where he mentions glass twice, a desk made of glass, glass-walled room. So there's this transparency and this sense of people looking in on them and like an invasion of privacy. Maybe I'm reading into that a little bit. Then in the third stanza, I really like the alliteration there. The teacup template for fingerprints. So it's like he knows, like, Dad, they're fooling you, don't do it. And his father, who doesn't understand what's going on or doesn't care, reaches and gives them the fingerprints. And then the other thing, like I said, that stood out to me were those last couple lines. Why is there a bitter tongue? A sweet scent and a bitter tongue. What's going on? Are these people unhappy together? I just thought that was a strange way to end the poem. So, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
The line that hit me was the fifth stanza. Because the earth, my father says in his country, because the earth knows the scent of history, it gave the people sage.
Oh, yeah, I had marked that one. The earth knows the scent of history. I thought that was cool.
So sage apparently is meant to be a comfort, right? A way of covering comfort.
The stomach pains it talks about in the next section.
And then the poet or the speaker says, I like my tea with sage fresh from my mother's garden. So clearly sage is important to him and to his culture and to his family. And I don't know who Hagar is. I would probably look that up. The allusion to Hagar.
I know there's a comic strip called Hagar, the horrible, but I don't think this is that same Hagar.
I think that's about a Viking.
Yes, with red hair. This is definitely not that Hagar.
Let's see. She tells a story, but the scene, the last scene, is a story that the mother is telling. So that's not even real, right?
Yeah, she's just telling him a story, right? So she's making the tea, she drops in the sage, and then she's telling the story to her son, who I'm assuming is the speaker, and that's where, and then it just ends with his mother's story to him. And I'm just really curious why the sweet scent, bitter tongue. She makes it, he drinks. Is that a literal description of what sage tastes like as you're drinking it? Or is there something else going on? The bitter tongue, I'm wondering if it's like a coda and it ties back to the scene with his father at the beginning, right? Like he's sitting with his mother drinking the tea, and he remembers how his father was kind of duped, by these guys at the airport.
Right. And the scent, because I'm not familiar with sage, apparently the scent of sage is sweet, which if we go back to, because the earth knows the scent of history, it gave the people sage. So the earth is giving a sweet scent to cover up the stink of history, right? And
we looked up Fady Joudah, and he is a Palestinian writer. So if you take that context and place that on this poem, it's almost like, the sage and the earth, right? And the idea of the Palestinian conflict, and the sage is it's comforting to him, right? And it's kind of like that's what bonds him to his parents,
right? But somehow it's also bitter. The fact, maybe bitter in that he needs it, right? That there is a need for this comfort because of what is happening to him, being chased by the guards and his father being duped with the fingerprints, right? And I know. I mean, obviously, we would have to read more and think more.
Definitely a reread. I'd want to look up some more information on the author. I'd want to look up, like you said, Hagar, and just get more of a sense. I like this because it seems like it's just the beginning. Like it's kind of opening us up to think about a lot of other things.
And yet it's a whole, it's like a whole history, because you've got the son and the mother and the father, and then this other family. I mean, it's expansive, right? It just gets bigger the more the world of the poem gets bigger, right? The more you think about it.
Little space. Okay, well, definitely lots to think about. It was a different one, and I thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about this week. So, I had two questions off of this poem. So he talks a lot about using sage and tea to relax. What do you use to relax? If you have something that's on your mind, what do you do to relax? And the other thing is, this seems to be a memory of his parents, the idea of the tea and the sage and sharing these cups of tea with his parents. What memories do you have of something that reminds you of times you shared with your parents?
All right, so we're going to continue our section where we present books that you might be interested in. This week, it is Robert Pinsky's The Sounds of Poetry, A Brief Guide. And I'm not going to say too much, except for that it helped me kind of think through the different ways that sound can act in a poem, and the very subtle. He's very big on pointing out that the sounds of a poem are situational, right? Like every word depends on the word around it for the actual sound. So very subtle. I like the way that he gives you a section of a poem, and then he talks about it, and then he gives you the same section to think about again, and then he talks about it, and then he gives you the same section again to kind of think about, so that you kind of get this accretion of, oh, okay, this is, in this 2 lines, there's 14 things going on with sound. And it's very readable, right? He purposely says, I'm not going to use jargon, I'm not going to use all the big terminology from poetry, and I don't know, I found it interesting. You might find it interesting, so maybe check it out. All right, thanks for watching. Please join the conversation in the comments on YouTube or on Twitter at Trojan Poetry DGN. Also check out our website at trojanpoetrydgn.blogspot.com.